see that the rules get this. John, your mic's off. John, you're on mute.
Good morning. Welcome.
Start over.
It's Sunday morning, February 20th, and I'd like to welcome you to the Sunday Forum of Plymouth Congregational Church in Minneapolis. Whether you're watching it live with us or in some recorded format, please know you are welcome, and we're glad to have you here with us. A couple of brief comments about Zoom before we begin, just in case anybody needs the reminder. There are a couple of buttons down at the bottom of your screen. One is a Q&A button if you have a question for our presenters during the presentation, or if you want to actually ask your question out loud, you can raise your hand. Please use your chat only if you need technical support, if you're having technical difficulties of some sort. So with that, it is my honor and pleasure to briefly introduce our presenters. Jim Christensen is the head of the convener of Plymouth's Habitat Committee, and I'll be introducing him in just a minute. And then he will be introducing John Davenport, who has been a longtime participant and leader in Habitat at Plymouth. And then we also have with us this morning Julia Schaefer, who is an engagement associate. Had to make sure I got the title right here. An engagement associate at Habitat, and she'll be telling us. So John Davenport will be giving us sort of the Plymouth history and picture of Habitat, and then Julia will be giving us the larger Twin Cities and social and socioeconomic picture of Habitat and where we fit into a number of things that Plymouth is very interested in, like racial justice, like equal housing. And so Julia will help fill us in on that side of things. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, John. You kind of stole my thunder there, saying the speakers. I'll introduce John Davenport, who has been a Habitat guy since probably early 2000s. He was there when I started several years ago, and has been an organizer of it and really great volunteer. And then Julia, who's the senior engagement associate, will give us the Habitat perspective. We're just happy to be back. We're in the chapel this morning. The church is open for people, and that's really a nice thing. And we're looking forward to doing a build, hopefully this spring. Julia will give us a little insight on that, and then a brush with kindness later in the year, as we've done in the past. But why don't I'll introduce John. You can give us some history of the Plymouth's Habitat program, and then we'll turn it over to Julia. John?
Jim, thanks very much. The Plymouth's history is interesting, dates back to the 1980s, when two of our Plymouth members, Alice Tuseth and Olive Jean Bailey, had gone to Mississippi and volunteered down there for a couple of times. Olive Jean was the mother of Carla Bailey, who you might recall was one of our recent ministers. From Mississippi, they brought back to us their personal experience and some of the Habitat ideals. After that, there were some work projects with Plymouth Youth to South Dakota, Colorado, and Kentucky, which were led by youth ministers, and two vans were driven with the whole personnel by Greg Vanell and John Humphrey. Our local program in Plymouth began in earnest in 1993, which is now 29 years on, with planning committees of 5 to 6 church members that changed over the years, choosing suitable projects and discussing the dates of the work weeks with the with the Habitat organization. We also recruited and organized the groups of volunteers, which you'll hear about in a moment. We had strong support by the Plymouth Community Fund, which was about $6,000 per work week at that time. I don't know what it's become these days. Each year we do 2 projects a week long. In mid to late May, we have what we call the Build Week, where we work on a new home that's being constructed entirely by Plymouth. with a contract with the new owners, which is you'll hear about from Julia. We have a professional supervisor, so-called site supervisor from Habitat, along with 1 or 2 AmeriCorps staff. We do all the work except for the foundation, electrical, plumbing, heating, and shingling the roof, all of which are very professional and detailed. And the roof is, fairly risky for people that don't do this very often. We fill a standard 5-day week with volunteers, which are 10 to 14 on each week. Some of them work 1, but many work for more than that, sometimes 5 days, which has been my habit over the years. We work on one of the first weeks of construction toward the end, or usually somewhere in the middle. The whole project usually takes a few months to accomplish. During these sessions, we often meet with one of the new owners, sometimes both of them, man and wife. And these people are working with us doing their sweat equity, which again, you'll hear about. That's one of the contract things. The new owners need to participate in the construction of their new home. In the fall, usually late August to early October, we work with the Habitat Brush with Kindness, which is working on an older and occupied home involving exterior and interior repairs, painting and minor modifications. The modifications are often putting on a new porch. On 2 occasions, we built a deck in the back of the home. And we can complete the whole project in that work week, that 5-day week, which is really enjoying to see it all come together as we had planned. We often, and perhaps usually, meet and chat with the owner as we're working, and sometimes she has lunch with us, as we'll hear about. Over these years, the participation of the church members is of interest, and I have been keeping records of all the volunteers for 11 years between 2008 and 2018, which involved 22 different work weeks. 162 of the church members worked during that time on at least one project, and some of them worked the whole 5-day week and some just 1 or 2. Of these, 82 were men and 80 women, pretty much equally divided. 12 of them worked on at least 10 projects during that time, mostly men, although the person that worked the most, which is 21 weeks, was a woman. Bonnie Hare has been on the committee and worked with me quite a bit, and you'll hear about what she has helped later. Below 10 weeks, the gender distribution, of course, was essentially equal. We also had a volunteer crew of women who brought lunches, usually 2 and sometimes just 1, planned and served a meal, brought it to feed all the volunteers, including the site supervisor and the AmeriCorps people. Over on that group, there were 29 women altogether, 2 every day. As again, of those 29, 10 of them also worked in different weeks on construction with us. We enjoy this lunchtime off of work, ability to socialize with all the people there, chatting with other members, both friends and people we've met for the first time. And sometimes friends of the volunteers who are not Plymouth members came and worked with us. Several supervisors had very pleasant, favorable comments about us in that instead of 1 or 2 people a day, we were often working several days in a row, and it was cohesive organization, which they thought was very good for the construction of the building. Also, the socialization with a prepared lunch, as I mentioned, was unusual in other groups because often those people would go out to lunch and be gone from the site for about an hour. So overall, I think there are 2 takeaways. One is the often stated Habitat motto, learn new skills. And the other is the importance of the social experience, which I mentioned, working with old friends and making new ones. And again, getting to know the Habitat owners.
Thank you, John. And without further ado, we'll turn it over to Julia and we'll hear about the current Habitat story and what's going on and what's coming down the road in the future. Julia?
Thank you both. I am going to share the presentation I've put together And let me know, do you see the presentation or my notes? Do you guys see my slides, or do you see like the behind the scenes presenter view?
We see the slides.
Great. Okay, well, I'm Julia. Thank you for the lovely introduction. And I've been working with Habitat almost 4 years. I have done 1 year as an AmeriCorps member, so out there building with groups and facilitating construction. And then I liked Habitat so much that I applied for a job, and now I'm an engagement associate, which is a little bit of a nonsense term. So the reason we use it is because our volunteer and our fundraising are so deeply tied together, because so many of our partners both build and sponsor their builds. So that hence the funny title. But I work with sponsor groups and volunteer groups and community, faith, corporate partners, all sorts of people. And I love talking about Habitat, and particularly because there are partnerships like Plymouth's that are super robust. They've been around for a long time. You guys contribute so many volunteer hours. You also contribute and support us financially, which is terrific. And it's really fun to hear people who have been building for a really long time and have kind of the history of Habitat encapsulated in their programs. So for some of you, this might be a totally redundant presentation, and for some of you, it might be new and interesting. And if you're in the middle, great. Please feel free to ask questions as I go along. But I'm happy to be here talking about the direction Habitat's going, our history, and then just some more detail about what we do. So for those who have worked with us for a long time, you know the ethos of our organization. We're an affordable housing organization. But in the last year, we've gone through a process of reviewing our mission, vision, and values, and kind of bringing them up to speed for the direction we're heading as an organization. So our new mission is we bring people together to create, preserve, and promote affordable homeownership and to advance racial equity in housing. So for anyone who's known Habitat, most of that is the same. We preserve, we create, we promote affordable housing. That was what we will always be doing. But I think for our organization and for largely the Minnesota community in the last couple of years, we've become increasingly aware that to talk about affordable housing without talking about racial equity is not a way to solve affordable housing problems. So we've become really dedicated in centering racial equity in housing to as both a context of the work we do and as the only way to do our work effectively. So I'll continue to talk about that throughout the presentation, but I think that that encapsulates what's driving us and what continues to motivate people who partner with us. But we are one of the largest affiliates, and I attribute that to a couple things. I attribute it to Minnesota being the #2 state of volunteerism in the United States. We have a lot of awesome Fortune 500 companies that continue to be headquartered here that are very supportive of Habitat. We have a pretty great faith community that is also robust and also really deeply tied to mission work and Habitat's mission. And for some reason, ours just grew a lot. We're one of the biggest affiliates too, and we're really proud of the work that we've done. But we come from Georgia. Habitat for Humanity originated in Americus, Georgia in 1942 on Koinonia Farms. If you haven't heard of it, they've got an awesome website. But the originator of kind of the concept of Habitat for Humanity was Clarence Jordan. He was a farmer and a biblical scholar, and he was deeply committed to community and racial equity. So he operated from a very segregated environment, and as someone existing in that time and in that space, noticed that a lot of his Black neighbors and neighbors of color weren't able to afford housing or able to access housing. There were people who were experiencing economic disparities who couldn't afford housing. And so in 1973 at Koinonia Farm, they developed the concept of partnership housing, which emphasized people working together side by side to build decent, affordable homes. So like John mentioned, the idea of sweat equity, which right now is on pause at Twin Cities Habitat because of COVID, but that we build in partnership with families who are purchasing from us. It's a community effort to create access to affordable housing. So from that idea, Habitat for Humanity International was born and founded in 1976. And now today, Habitat affiliates in more than 1,400 communities and in 70 countries. So gigantic. Habitat affiliates build in all 50 states. We build in DC, we build in Puerto Rico. Each affiliate is an independent, locally managed organization. So when I talk about what Twin Cities Habitat does, it's similar to what other affiliates might do, but there are affiliates of kind of every type of size. Some affiliates are still managed by volunteer groups. Some affiliates like Habitats have a ton of staff and kind of a larger, more in-depth organizational structure. But we all come out of the same culture and the same ethos at Cornelia Farm. Habitat for Humanity Twin Cities was founded and established in 1985. It was established by a Lutheran congregation in South Minneapolis. Like I said, some affiliates are still small and they still are run by volunteers. And some of them were such robust volunteer groups, they became fully blown companies like Twin Cities Habitat. So since then, more than 1,500 families have partnered with us to achieve affordable homeownership. We're recognized as an affiliate of distinction nationally. We were the innovator of critical home repair, A Brush with Kindness, which then became Rock the Block, and a bunch of other iterations around the nation in different affiliates. We have currently 126 full-time stations available online. Annually, between 15 or 32 AmeriCorps service members served with Habitat. That's how I became a Habitat staffer. And I think somewhere around 30% of our staff are former AmeriCorps, so a really awesome program. And we are known for housing. Our flagship program is the construction of single family housing. So at Twin Cities Habitat, there are a couple of methods we use for housing. We build what people are most used to participating with us. So we build around 35, 40 of those a year. And as we grew as an organization, that didn't continue to grow. There is a limit to how much we can build from a blank slate. It's around 35, 40. But we also buy and rehab. So we have staff members who buy homes off the open market. We have the right of first refusal on Habitat developed properties. So often when a family moves on for a new job, or they need to downsize, or they need to grow their size, they can sell their home back to Habitat, and we rehab it, put it back on the property letters served to clients in our pipeline. And we also have the open market. So people can purchase a Habitat home or use the Habitat mortgage to purchase a home on the open market. And that's what really allowed Twin Cities Habitat to move beyond maybe 50 homes a year to over 100 closings with families a year. So a significant contribution to our ability to provide homeownership for families. So our affordable housing model operates on the assumption that 30% of someone's income is what is considered affordable. That's dictated by HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So our mortgage product is set at a monthly mortgage payment of 30% of a family's income at time of closing, which provides them an affordable mortgage and starts building their equity right away.
Hey, Julia, sorry to interrupt. Your presentation seems to have switched and we can see the notes again now.
Okay. I will change it if I remember how to do that. How's that?
Looks great. Thank you.
Thank you for telling me.
Yep.
Well, now you know that the notes are there too, if you got some behind the scenes reading. So we build all over the Twin Cities Metro. We are the 7-county metro area. We have built in 64 cities. And even this year, our builds range from Prior Lake and Chaska all the way over to Bayport and all the way up to Coon Rapids. So we build all over the 7-county metro, providing lots of people home ownership opportunities in neighborhoods that they want to live in, that are close to their jobs and their communities, and also create affordable housing in lots of different places so that we are not continuing to segregate where affordable housing is. And we build about half in the suburbs and about another half in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. This data is from 2016 to 2020 and shows the averages and the statistics of who we serve. So the racial and ethnic diversity of our homeowners, we've always worked with majority homeowners of color. We have a lot of success and popularity in the immigrant community. If you come to a new country with no credit, it's really easy to work with our financial advisors to build credit and become mortgage ready. And once you have a good experience, you tell all of your friends. And so in that really tight-knit community, we've become a trusted partner. So we have a lot of success. And the average household size is about 4 to 5 family members, and the average household income is about $58,000. So people in that range of salary and family size are often people who are like X-ray technicians, hospital staff, educators, bus drivers. And we share these things just to kind of reiterate the point that affordable housing is a need for people who have paid income. And also a lot of the jobs that fit in this income range are people who are really affected by COVID and worked on the front lines. We know that housing is a social multiplier. So when we talk about why affordable housing is important, it's not just housing. Housing impacts health outcomes, education outcomes. A lot of people feel safer in stable housing. And one thing that we were really interested by when we did this study with Wilder Research was that 92% of adults have gone back to or plan to go back to school. So it's not just thinking about kids currently in the school system who are really, really importantly impacted by this, but also a lot of adults will go back and seek continued education, which I think is a really cool outcome. So people attribute these positive changes to habitat, which is a direct attribution to affordable housing and stable housing. And like I said, affordable housing is not just important to people who we think of as being low income earners or things like that. 1 in 4 Minnesotans spend more than 30% of income on housing. I do, and I'm a renter. Housing costs are rising while incomes remain relatively stagnant. There's inflation. Minnesota's racial gap in homeownership is among the worst in the nation. So this is not just impacting 1 in 4 people, but also disproportionately impacting families of color. And we know that homes lead to greater outcomes in kind of every field of life. So it's really important that we address this as a way to address a lot of other social disparities. So Minnesota is the best, right? We have #2 in volunteerism. We've got a great culture of philanthropy. We have really good health outcomes and really strong healthcare systems. A lot of people have homeownership in Minnesota, and yet we lead the nation in the racial disparities in homeownership. So as you can see, particularly Black communities have really lower rates of homeownership than white communities. And we are proud as a state to lead the nation in many things. This is one that we should not be proud of, and one that I think really shapes the way that we should are starting to do philanthropy and volunteerism in Minnesota. But this large disparity didn't just come from nowhere. As part of the growth of Twin Cities Habitat, we've been looking backwards. You can't solve current or future housing problems without knowing where they came from. And we know that the disparities in homeownership rates are rooted in racist policies. They're rooted in redlining, the practice of banks and other organizations taking maps and segregating areas that could have investment or they could underwrite mortgages for. Racial covenants was the practice of putting very specific racial language to not sell houses or give deeds to particular types of people, namely families of color. We've built interstates through thriving communities of Black families. There's all sorts of intentional ways that we have created a segregated problem of housing. So part of the growth and the way of centering racial equity in our organization is to know that we need to be just as intentional in solving our disparities as we were in creating them. And some of the work that we're doing, which I really think that we're in the beginning steps of, but that are going in a good direction. If you think back to that chart I showed of who Habitat serves, we know we do a really good job serving families of color, and we knew we did a really good job serving immigrant communities, all of which we will continue to do and is deeply important to us. But if you disaggregate our past data of serving Black families into maybe immigrant Black families, and then what we call foundational Black Americans, which can be understood to be descendants of slavery in America, we were not serving foundational Black Americans very well. The percent rates of people entering our program pipeline and not finishing were disproportionately high with those families. So we wanted to, like all people trying to grow, take what was working, take the partners and the families who are doing well in our programs and elevate that, and to look really critically at people who are not having a good time going through the Habitat program. So to better understand the barriers, we launched a research project with our esteemed partner, Dr. Brittany Lewis, who owns and operates a research organization called Research in Action. And we're finishing up the like data collection stage and should have more to share hopefully soon. Trying to figure out how we can better work with Black families, foundational Black Americans, to achieve homeownership through our means and methods. We also have a really awesome blog series called the Race and Housing blog series that expands upon all of those techniques and like redlining and racial covenants, and has a bunch of resources. I've learned a lot from it to be able to talk about racial equity in housing. I recommend going to look at it. And then we're continuing to put all this language in how we talk to our partners and talk externally, like today. And I'm gonna pivot really quick and just talk about Habitat. Since that work is unfolding, here are all the things that we do that we're trying to center in racial equity. So most people know, and I just talked quite a bit about creating Homeownership. That's our flagship program. Were I to go poll someone on the street, they would mention two things. They'd mention creating homeownership and they'd mention Jimmy Carter. But we do a lot of other things. And Plymouth has been really involved with our Brush with Kindness program, our critical home repair program, where we work with owner-occupied clients to keep them in their homes and do necessary home repairs. So it's a really important way to address housing needs. We have a small but mighty advocacy team who organizes local, we call housing heroes, to talk to their lawmakers, legislators, to work on the local, the neighborhood, the state, the national level, to advocate for the housing spectrum, so all resources for housing, but also specifically for affordable housing. Global engagement is one way people are involved with Habitat, and it's not currently active in a volunteer opportunity. So when COVID hit, we paused global engagement trips, and they will continue to be paused while the global COVID situation continues to, I think, ebb and flow. But we still have active relationships with all of our international affiliates. The Twin Cities Habitat affiliate has a couple of specific tithing partners. So we partner with the affiliate in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and Ethiopia. So we stay in contact with them, and we continue to financially support them even when we cannot send volunteers. And if you haven't been to the Restore, you're really missing out. So we have two home repair outlets. They have furniture, they have gently used home goods. If you're doing a home renovation project and need carpeting or tiles, it's a great place to look. If you have any furniture or things you're wanting to donate, it's a great place to try first. The proceeds from that store build up to around 4 houses a year. There's 2 locations in Minneapolis and New Brighton. And they also keep a lot of things out of landfills. So it's kind of one of the ways that we have some sustainability work in our programs. And they're a really awesome place. And they also take volunteers. If you ever have a Saturday or even a weekday, couple of hours, they're shorter shifts. They're really fun. And check out our website or follow up with me after the meeting. But since I went into so much detail for home repair, and one thing that you all do with Habitat is a Brush with Kindness, I wanted to expand on that a little bit. So our critical home repair program does extensive home repairs, interior and exterior painting. In the summertime, it's kind of a cyclical schedule. Summertime, we have a lot of volunteer groups out to scrape and paint houses, to maybe do porch or stair repair, to work up on the roof, to be kind of doing all of that exterior things that maybe a homeowner could be being cited for by the city. Enough citations can lead to eviction. So this program kind of works a little bit more towards the end of preventing homelessness. And we know that for a lot of people who own a home, the cheapest, most sustainable, and probably emotionally the best for them is to stay in their home. So this program works really specifically to address those needs. And there's a lot of health risks that can happen if you have a critical home repair that you're unable to do physically or financially. So we have had clients who haven't been in their kitchen for 5 years. So there are really awesome things we can accomplish by working with that owner-occupied people. And that program continues to be a great resource to our communities. And we're excited to have another summer of doing those projects. I think we're almost caught up with our our COVID backlist of people who are waiting to get their projects done, which is great. And we're happy to be finally getting caught up from such an odd period of time. But before I stop for questions, just quick plug for other things you can do to get involved with Habitat. I can't recommend enough going and reading our Race and Housing blog series. Like I said, it continues to educate me on how to talk about race and housing, why our disparity exists when I had such a rose-colored lens on Minnesota, which maybe not totally going away, but contextualizing our work a little bit more clearly. We have events you can attend. We have our hard hat and black tie gala in April. We have our annual advocacy event in April. We have opportunities for you to volunteer as frequently as you want, including if you have the time and the interest, a regular volunteer program. People volunteer anywhere up to 2 times a week to once a month. It's a great way to meet people. You can do it on your own or as part of a crew. And the Restore Home Improvement outlets. They're great for shopping. They're great for donating. My couch is from there. And we are always looking for volunteers who enjoy working with people and taking in donations. And it's a little bit less of a time constraint than coming out to our construction sites. And like John said, you guys build twice every year and the spring is coming. And next week, actually, my team sits down in earnest to start planning our summer schedule. So more to come on our end for opportunities this year to get involved with Plymouth on the build site or the home repair site. But thank you for your time. That was relatively quick, so I could have time for questions, but I'm happy to double back on anything if you want me to clarify, and happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Real quickly, we're not used to having people in the chapel. It is wonderful to see people in the chapel. Thanks for being with us. We'd like to, if you have a question, you're there in the chapel, please feel free to go to the podium mic and ask your question there at the mic. Everybody else, please use the raise your hand or use the Q&A, and we'll deal with your questions now. Thank you.
I was not aware that the spring program went all summer. I thought that was just a week, so I'd like to hear more about that.
Plymouth's participation is in the spring typically has been on the build program, and that just is a week where we do starts as soon as the weather permits and goes until the weather stops it. And then similarly, the Brush with Kindness can be any time during the nice weather period. We typically have done it in the September kind of time frame to sort of spread things out. I would just like to note for everybody who might be looking at this, that on the Plymouth side, on our website, if you go to ACT at the top, the button ACT, and then I think you can go from there to Habitat. And that has my email, I think, and contact information and whatnot. So if you have an interest and you haven't been involved in Habitat before, take a look at that and certainly send me an email, and I'll put you on the list. When we have the projects going and all, we send out the email that goes, it's to a lot of people, and I try and keep that up. I would note that Doug Freeman at the church office, probably at least once a month, maybe 2 or 3 times, I'll get an email from him saying that here's somebody that's either an interested person or a new member or whatever who has an interest, and then I make sure that they get on our list for upcoming projects. I know there are several people in Plymouth who do the regular volunteering where they volunteer once a week or once a month and get on a regular crew. For all of those programs, Julia, maybe you could clarify for us, where would somebody go to find information about working at Restore or being a regular volunteer? Where do they go on the Habitat website for that?
Super good question. Thank you. On the Habitat website, once you navigate to get involved, it has a link with all of the different like types of opportunities. So you can go to group volunteering if you want to join a crew. You can go to individual volunteering. You can go to the Restart website, or you can give them an email, and I'd be happy to connect them directly with the organizer internally who works on those programs. So kind of anyway, if you call Habitat, someone will connect you to us. But the website is pretty good to navigate, to go to, like, I want to volunteer, here's how I want to volunteer, and then there's a form you fill out that will get you connected right to the person in Habitat who organizes those volunteers. I gave you too many answers. Go to our website or reach out to me directly, I think, are the two best ways. And feel free to pass my email on to anybody who's interested.
Thanks, Julia. Jackie?
Two questions, if I could. Could you talk a little bit more about the market sales for Habitat owners? And could you tell us, financially, do you depend on the state for a lot of your money?
Those are a good question. Do you mean the open market program where home buyers can purchase off the open market?
Yes.
I assume so. Okay, great. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we're one of the first affiliates to use that as a way to increase our ability to partner with families. We created the opportunity for people to go to, we have a realtor network of realtors who work with Habitat, or independently with their own realtor, approach us as a lending organization. So what they're using is not the Habitat mortgage and a Habitat developed home, but just the Habitat mortgage product. So someone could approach us and go through our programs, like go through our financial coaching, check in with our homeownership coaches to make sure they're mortgage ready, but approach us with a realtor and an open market interest and use our financial product to have an affordable mortgage. So like all of our builds, there's an affordability gap. When we build it, it's still an expensive house. When someone else built it, it's still an expensive house. So the same philanthropy supports that program of creating an opportunity for families to have that affordable mortgage and still have home ownership. It ends up working out that people a little bit higher on the area median income range use that program. They have a little bit more buying power in the market. And people of a lower income range tend to use the Habitat developed model. And so it works really well for us to expand who we can work with and make sure more than just that 45 number of families can close with a new home with an affordable mortgage annually. And we're growing that realtor network. So if you know a realtor, we have, I think on our website too, when we look at the homeownership side, we're trying to expand a group of people who are knowledgeable and who are contributing their services to connect people on the open market to homeownership opportunities. And your other question was about financial support. So my team works all on private funding. So I'm part of the fundraising team. That's foundations, corporations, faith communities, individuals, planned giving, in-kind donations, all those kinds of things. But we also have a terrific team of public funding people who are applying for federal grants, who are working with municipalities and cities on not just opportunities, but also direct funding and grant opportunities. So I couldn't tell you a percentage off the top of my head, but for many of our projects, we have a certain pool of money that's coming from public funding and a certain pool of money that's coming from private funding. And both are super essential to make sure that we close that affordability gap between what it costs to build a home, buy a home, rehab a home, and what it actually costs when it's affordable. But that's an awesome question. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit to that, from Plymouth's perspective, when we do our build week or our brush with kindness week, it's not just the volunteers who show up at the site who are participating from Plymouth, but we're all as a congregation participating because Plymouth provides funding for that week. I think as John mentioned, I'm not sure if the number is 5,000 or 6,000 or whatever, but we support the purchase of materials and all of those sorts of things. So it's a whole congregation effort. It's not just the people who show up at Habitat. And certainly, for just to remind everybody, sometimes we've done that where the Christmas offering has been to fund the Habitat project. It's generally through the outreach board and the community fund. But for anybody who has an interest in Habitat, to be able to support Plymouth's effort financially is a big plus. So we always need worker volunteers, but financial support is also a big plus for us as a congregation.
Thank you, Jim. That's a great point. Any way people contribute to Habitat is so valuable to us. Volunteer hours, financial support, telling friends and family, advocating with local legislators, going to the restore. But the incredible part of our model is that partners like Plymouth do all of that. You contribute financially, which is so important for that affordability and to keep our model going. And also you come and volunteer, which one of the reasons we can exist is our volunteer program is so robust. So many people come out to build. It's the only reason I know how to fix anything in my apartment, and it's a great way to come to site, and it has a real contribution to making sure we can continue to create affordable housing. So thank you.
Julia, a quick question about the health research you mentioned.
Yeah.
Home ownership contributed to what, 41% fewer visits to a doctor, I think it was. Could you
exactly right. Yeah.
What's that connection? Why is that? Did the research explain why that was the case?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And as part of this research, we have anecdotal, what's the word I'm looking for? Interviews and things to support this. So with the 41% visits to the doctor, less visits to the doctor, a lot of that is about health concerns contributed to by like poorly maintained rentals. A lot of people who bounce between rentals, particularly as rentals continue to be unaffordable, will be in spaces that give their kids asthma. They have responses to water damage and mold. Just the general instability of moving a ton often just contributes to less ability to visit the doctor financially, and also increased stress and lack of sleep and all the things that I think make us susceptible to viruses and community health issues. But I think the biggest one that we've learned is the reduction in asthma rates and the types of health issues that come from living in with terribly old carpeting, or all the things that end up being in less maintained environments that can really negatively impact, particularly the health of children. So we found that to be both interesting and a challenging finding that motivates our work and helps us understand why it is not just a house, but it multiplies in so many parts of your life. That was a really good question and great memory. It was exactly 41%.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah,
John,
thanks.
John, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. Actually, I have one last question I'll toss in if nobody else has any. What was the exact relationship in terms of kids doing better in school because of stable housing? Seemed to me that was really significant, and I would like to remember that.
I don't think any of the statistics were specific to that. 92% of adults went back to school or plan to, but we do know that 91% of the survey participants, who were all the parents of these households, felt that they felt better about their kids' future. And the anecdotal support is that their kid had a bedroom to do their homework in after school that was theirs, and they had more space to encourage study habits. They weren't switching schools as frequently as sometimes you have to when you move from district to district if you're moving the location of your housing. All of those things support all we've heard anecdotally from our clients, that once that they have stable housing where they are in there for the duration of the rest of their child's time in a school district, they had better grades, they had more access to doing their homework, they had more access to building community and relationships. So I think that's kind of getting at that relationship.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jim. At this point, this is the point where the audience in the chapel can actually applaud as wildly as you feel you would like to applaud. And then for those of us attending virtually, you have to imagine that we're applauding. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us. It's a great program. I cannot say enough good things about it. So please accept our thanks and for a job well done. Thanks, everybody. With that, I need to move on to the next event coming up next week, which is called What's Happening at Plymouth. And basically, it's a brief overview of all the things that are happening at Plymouth, that because we're not in the building, we are maybe less in touch with than we would like. So we've asked some people to share with us things that they're excited about, things that are coming up. Nancy Gores from the Leadership Council, Tom Anderson from Community Life, Mike McGettigan from Administration and Finance, Diane Hallberg from Fine Arts, Joanna Schussler from Spiritual Formation, Mary Jordan from Outreach, Maureen Tanis from Worship, Barb Iverson from Racial Justice Initiative, and Mary Welfling, the Plymouth Archivist. So it'll be a great chance to get caught up on all the things that are happening around the church that maybe you are not as in touch with as you would like. So please feel free to join us next week for, I think it'll be a great presentation. With that, thanks again to our presenters this morning. Wonderful work. Please keep it up. And with that, I'll bid you good morning. Talk